Hi, this is Hutch, and today we're going to talk about borrowing some Luna for degen strategies without living on the edge by posting LUNAx to Edge Protocol's money markets. And we're going to do so to get some enhanced yield on our total Luna stack without incurring much, if any, additional risk. And we're going to do so in a way that's liquid, that we can get out of this position at any time if other opportunities arise. And just so you know, this is going to be one of the contenders for the up-and-coming Degen Vaults by Stader Labs. These done-for-you vaults where you just post LUNAx into them and they take care of all the steps you're about to see, plus the managing and the manicuring in this done-for-you way. And for those of you that are more DIY types, well, I'm going to go over all the steps in this video, so let's jump in and take a look. So what is Edge Protocol? Edge Protocol is a true money market where depositors and borrowers meet. So you can see here, this is the supply market where you can supply a number of different Terra assets, whether it be different forms of Luna, different forms of stablecoins, or even a couple of tokens from key Terra protocols like Anchor and Mirror. And you can see the supply APY, that's the rate of return you'd earn simply for just supplying these for other people to borrow. Now, also when you supply, you can choose to boost your borrowing power by clicking this toggle. There's actually one when you click supply too, where you can handle it all in one transaction. But when you boost your borrowing power, essentially everything that you've supplied, you get to use that as collateral for some factor that you can see here in the boost borrowing power. And once you've supplied any type of collateral, you can go down to the borrow market and you'll see the exact same assets listed. And now you can borrow any one of these, again, within a certain factor. So you only can borrow a certain percentage depending on how much you've supplied. And notice that the borrow APY interest rates are all a little bit higher than the supply rates. And this is just because, again, it's a dynamic money market. And there's a very cool widget down here. If we go all the way to the bottom to asset info, you can see this ramp. And what this ramp is this is the dynamic borrow and supply APY. And the more it's being used, known as the utilization rate, the higher that both goes up. And when you hit a certain threshold, usually in this 70% range, maybe it's 70, maybe 75, maybe 85, you see it starts to ramp up. And once the ramp starts ramping up, it becomes less attractive to borrow and more attractive to supply. Again, just to create equilibrium around the ecosystem, they're going to incentivize more people to supply, which will then, when you do supply, it'll bring the rate of return down to both supply it and borrow it. So if we jump back to the supply market and take a look at all the supply APYs listed here, you'll notice that LUNAx is one of the lowest ones up there. But this is counterintuitive because I'm going to contend that LUNAx is the apex form of Luna to borrow against. So I actually made an entire video about this. It's about 4.5 minutes long. Don't go yet. I'll give you the quick answer now so we can continue with this strategy. But LUNAx is an auto-compounding token. It takes all the staking yields from Luna and it auto-compounds it back into the token itself, so it keeps expanding. So that if Luna and LUNAx over time stayed flat, LUNAx would actually keep getting bigger because of the embedded staking yield. So this 0.03 shown by the Edge market supply APY, that's added on to the inherent staking yield you're getting. Not so with Luna. You can earn 1.96% by posting it to Edge's supply market, but essentially you're not earning the 6.5 or 6 3/4 or whatever. It's been around that area for the time being. I still will say when you buy Luna from an exchange or you borrow against Anchor to buy some Luna and you're not going to stake it, you want to get some good swap arbs and they're just not there, it's better to supply it here on Edge market while you're waiting and at least make a little something for the time being. But for long-term plays like the one we're going to talk about to enhance the total yield, why not keep all of your staking yield? And that's why to use LUNAx. So if we come back over to the borrow market and take a look at the same assets and their borrow APYs, you'll see that some are more attractive than others. Some are just downright inactionable, and certain ones just jump out at you. I will tell you, don't fall into this rookie trap that I did when I first found Edge Protocol. I saw AUST at 2.24% and I thought, that's great. I'll earn 19.5%. I'll pay 2.24% and I'll pocket the difference. Not how it works. In a true money market, you have to pay back in the token itself. So if I borrow AUST, I'm not the one earning that 19.5%. The depositor is, kind of like my LUNAx token. I get to keep all my staking yields. They get to keep their auto compounding of the UST inside AUST, and I have to pay them back with an additional 2.24% AUST per year, plus that AUST's auto compounding away from me when I borrow it. So generally not a good idea. Probably the only time I'd use it is maybe for a flash loan situation. If I had some, say, ink token to post as collateral, to borrow AUST to put some dampener or cushion on my anchor loan so I don't get liquidated, in hopes of paying it back very quickly after Luna bounces. So where's the sweet spot? The sweet spot is in borrowing different forms of Luna assets to either swap or to farm. And I'll tell you why. But the reason why you want to borrow Luna derivatives against a Luna derivative is for LTV management. And I'll show you what I mean. So remember, I have 200 LUNAx supplied. And if we look at my position, you'll see that I'm at a 60% LTV. And I've actually had this position on for a week now, for 7 days. Now, what's interesting is when I posted the position, I started with a 60% LTV and it's hardly moved. Why? Because the value of what I supplied may be going up and down, but it's doing so in the same proportions as the assets I've borrowed. Why? Because they're all Luna derivatives. Yes, there might be different swap rates with them all, so there may be a little bit of skew, but for the most part, my LTV is not going to move that much unless there's some kind of crazy Oracle debacle. All of these things are going to move in tandem. So a lot of you are wondering or thinking, wait a second, you're just posting Luna, or in this case, LUNAx, to borrow different types of Luna and you're going to pay an interest rate. Well, I'm only doing that because I'm using this to farm Luna or different types of Luna to get a better rate of return than what I can borrow them for. And it's liquid, so if at any time the opportunity shrivels up, I could go ahead and just pay down the loan and be done with it. Now, I'll go over how I do that in just a moment and what the math is. But before I do, I want to tell you about the best opportunity or the best trade I ever did with Edge Market. And it was simply just borrowing lots of Luna to swap it when there was good arbs. And as a lot of you are probably aware of, at this moment, there is not very good swap arb. If I trade 100 Luna, as you can see here on Astroport, I can get 100.005 crumbs of extra B Luna. That's not worth doing. But we have little periods in time where you can earn 1, 2, 2.5%, 3%, sometimes even more in swap arbs, but you only have so much dry Luna powder to be able to do that with. And using Edge Market, if you have a bag of LUNAx that is just, call it your staking Luna anyway, you can post it here to really maximize those opportunities since they ebb and flow and they seem so few and far between. All right, so if we look back at my wallet history, we can see it all starts by increasing allowance on Stader LUNAx token, and that address is Edge Protocol supply market. Next, you can see a different address that's Edge Protocol's borrow market sent me 200 Luna, and that's because I chose to borrow 200 Luna against my safely staked LUNAx token. Now, what happened is I saw on Astroport that I could swap Luna to B Luna for an extra 2.5%, which was really, really juicy at the time, but I didn't have any dry powder and I didn't want to swap my LUNAx for Luna. I didn't want a taxable event. I want to maintain a certain amount of staked Luna. So instead, I posted my LUNAx as collateral to use OPL, other people's Luna, for this swap arb opportunity. And you can see I swapped the 200 Luna for 205.483875 B Luna, which was sweet. The borrow cost for the 200 Luna at the time was about 5%. So all I did is I did the math and I said, 5% divided by 12 months is a little less than 0.5%. So I'm going to give some back for the loan cost but the rest I get to keep myself. And as most of you know, I have to, in order to pay back the loan, I have to pay it back in Luna, not B-Luna. So I swap for B-Luna. I have to go to Anchor Protocol's bond burn mechanism to convert that B-Luna back to Luna. And that's going to take 21 days. So that's why I divided the 5% by 12. The other thing that I did is I plotted out, because if we look at this handy dandy widget down at the bottom and we do use the drop down to change to Luna, what we can see is right now we're kind of smack dab right in the middle of the utilization rate. So the borrow APR is about 4.5% at the time we were here. And when we get to 80% or more, this borrowing rate gets out of control. So this is really the risk in the transaction, is that lots of people started borrowing Luna and I could pay a crazy APR, in which case, I wouldn't lose all my money, but maybe instead of being 5.5 Luna to the good, I might be a couple Luna down. That was a risk I was prepared to take, and it worked out fine. We stayed in this kind of middle range. I think the rate actually went lower than 5%, but just to be safe, what I did is I bonded a little extra B Luna. So remember, I got 205.48. I kept the extra B Luna just in my wallet. In fact, I used it on Anchor to borrow some more. But I put 201.1 B Luna to come back in the form of Luna so I could pay back the loan back with a little extra just in case. And if we fast forward, you can see I got 201.101445 Luna from Anchor, but my loan costs only worked out to be, I needed to pay back 200.791576. And in fact, this is a little pro tip on Edge. I typed in a little extra because sometimes the loan can accrue while you're queuing it up, and you don't want to be left with crumbs or dust of a loan outstanding because that'll accrue against you. And that's why you see on my transaction, they sent me back 0.010768 of a Luna back to my wallet. But net, I swapped for 205.48. I paid less than 1 Luna, and that extra 4 point whatever, it's more than 4.5 Luna, I got to keep, again, by posting my LUNAx token and using OPL, other people's Luna, for this amazing swap arb. And that's great because there are times like in a lot of December and January when Astroport started, we went through a month where there was not very good swap arbs. And again, now we're at this period where people are wondering if swap arbs have gone away for good. I think it ebbs and flows, but it could take a month or over a month where there's no swap arbs. So when there are, you want to take maximum advantage of them. And this is a great way to do it. So now you're probably wondering, if there's no swap arbs, what do you do with Edge? And that's where I'm going to show you my farming opportunities. So I'm going to start with probably the lowest hanging fruit and simplest example I can think of to illustrate some of the core concepts that are going to be involved in all the different complex strategies that I'll go through for the rest of the video. And it would be to keep our LUNAx token as supply in Edge. Remember, we're getting our auto-compounded staking yields in Luna rolled up into the LUNAx token, plus a little tiny 0.03% of LUNAx for supplying it. That's really nominal. And once we supply that as collateral, we can borrow a certain amount of B Luna from the Edge borrow market. And simply by just keeping it in our wallet, we earn a certain amount of UST, equivalent to the staking yield. So this is actionable so long as the amount of UST I get as an annual percentage is greater than what it costs for me to borrow from Edge. And remember too, that I have to pay back an additional amount of B Luna. The interest that accrues against me accrues in B Luna. And so as long as the amount of UST I get is considerably higher than the amount of additional B Luna I have to pay back, then this is going to be actionable. Truth be told, it's not at this moment. To borrow B Luna is about 9% and the staking yield is 6.5%. But often you'll find times where you can borrow B Luna at 2 or 3%, in which case this makes sense. Now, the other risk I want you to be concerned about is that you have to basically dollar cost average that UST back into B Luna, because if B Luna pumps and you kept all your positive interest in UST, well, now you're going to owe more in B Luna than what you collected in UST. The other thing that I want you to remember is this is all liquid. So if for some reason that 2 or 3% borrow interest got to be 9 or 10 or 12 or whatever, and I wanted to get out of this trade, I could just simply take that B Luna I borrowed, pay it back with the interest, fold up the 10 on this transaction, and call it a day. So it's liquid, and I can be very nimble in getting in and out with it. Now, this brings me to a core concept I always like to remind my audience, because most people, when they hear the word borrow or debt or loan, they see red and they don't want any part of it. But it's all about strategic and responsible leverage and these positive feedback loops. So think about it. First of all, we have an asset that we've posted as collateral, and then we borrowed an asset, but we're putting that asset to use, and it's liquid and it's earning at a rate greater than what we're borrowing at. But we do have a liability in the middle, but can't we extinguish that liability with either asset at any time? So if we could simply just take the asset we borrowed plus the additional interest we earned to extinguish the liability at any time, are we really in debt? I think not. So with that in mind, let's look at a more complex example. We supply LUNAx as collateral to Edge, and we borrowed native Luna, which is currently costing us 4.6 per year. And once we borrow that Luna, we're going to take half of the Luna we borrowed and we're going to swap it for C Luna, Prism's complete Luna token. That's what I think the C stands for, half P, half Y. C Luna is essentially the same thing as Luna. And once we swap it on Terraformer, TFM.com. What's great about Terraformer is it's a DEX aggregator, so it actually looks at Astroport, Loop, TerraSwap, probably all the future DEXs that come on Terra, and it's going to find you the best path, the most efficient path to get the best swap, the best bang for your buck. Once we swap for half C Luna, we're going to go ahead and provide Luna and C Luna on Loop because it's currently paying in the high teen percentages. Now, it is worth noting that on Loop, you have to stake it for a week before you get rewards. Also, a good chunk of the rewards come to you in Loop tokens. And so there is additional risk here, similar to what I talked about before, that if you can't go ahead and scrape those tokens and put them back in what you owe, which is Luna, you run the risk of a disconnect in price and being upside down on that trade. I was okay with it at this moment because I was bullish Loop and I wanted to accumulate Loop, and thankfully some went up, and I may or may not swap some of that for Luna at this moment. That's up for me to decide. So that's one example of how to take 4.6% of what I owe and turn it into a net double-digit profit for me. Similarly, I can post LUNAx as collateral on Edge, and I can borrow half Luna at 4.6 and half ST Luna, another staked liquid stake token by Lido Finance, but tracks the price of Luna. That I can borrow at 1.08%, and this will auto compound unto itself. It doesn't matter because I intend to keep it in its form and pay it back in its form. If I go ahead and provide both of those assets as a pair into the Astroport liquidity pool, again, I can earn in the high teens. So I've brought my net rate of return down. I brought my net borrow cost down to, let's just do the math together. If we say 4.6 plus 1.08 divided by 2, 2.84%, and I can earn something in the double-digit returns, then that's a win. Again, there's additional risk here because a lot of my return comes in the form of Astro token. But again, I am bullish Astro at this moment, so I don't mind farming to get Astro. And then it's up to me to decide whether or not I want to keep Astro, or whether I want to convert it back into Luna and ST Luna to pay back the loan, or if I just use UST I have to go ahead and pay the additional and pick up the extra Astro token. Totally my choice. Probably the safest play, but also the lowest yielding play, would be to post LUNAx as collateral onto Edge, borrow Luna, and provide with B Luna. So if you need B Luna, you can borrow twice as much Luna and swap half for B Luna to provide in the Luna B Luna pool on Astroport or Spectrum Protocol, because Spectrum Protocol will actually auto compound all of those Astro rewards back into Luna and B-Luna. So essentially they're giving you what you need to pay back and probably the additional Apex assets that you want to keep over and above your borrow cost. Now that would come at the cost of 4.6%, but a lot of you like me have additional B-Luna that we had provided on Anchor for an Anchor loan. And now that the price of Luna has increased, we were able to withdraw B-Luna from Anchor Protocol as collateral, and it's just sitting in our wallet. So you could borrow the Luna half that you need and provide the B-Luna without having to borrow anything to go ahead and provide to this farm, whether you do it directly on Astroport or whether you use Spectrum Protocol's auto compounding. So I realized that was a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure you fully understood the concept. As a mentor I had in TradFi once told me, if you understand the concepts, the details are irrelevant. And if you don't understand the concepts, the details will always be irrelevant. So hopefully you understand that what we did here is we used assets we have to go ahead and borrow additional assets that stay liquid and correlated to what we're supplying for a relatively riskless loan, and we're trying to create interest over and above, or earnings, assets over and above what we have to pay back while we're waiting for juicier opportunities like the swap-arb opportunity. And by doing so, we're just creating one of these positive feedback loops. Now, this may be too much and just too complicated for you to do on your own. Maybe you don't want to participate in that. You just think, this is too complicated. And that's why Stader Labs is coming out with the Degen Vaults. So all of this can be done for you. You just take a certain amount of LUNAx, park it in the vault, and then all of this happens behind the scenes.